Fox barani Afrika. Hello, I'm Esther Githu-Ewart. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. Votes are being counted in Mozambique in an election that is widely expected to deliver another victory for the ruling Frelimo party. Millions of Sudanese are on the brink of famine due to a lack of food and the failure to deliver aid to the needy people in displacement and refugee camps. And Hurricane Milton slams the U.S. state of Florida with powerful winds and heavy rain, leaving behind a path of widespread destruction. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. Vote counting is ongoing in Mozambique Thursday after an election that is expected to deliver another victory for the ruling Frelimo party, which has been in power since 1975. The counting of the ballots is being highly scrutinized since Frelimo has been accused of rigging past elections, which it denies. VOA's Philip Alexiou has more.
The process is being highly scrutinized since Frelimo has been consistently accused of rigging past elections, which it denies. The full results can take up to 2 weeks. At one polling station at a school in the seaside capital Maputo, election observers watched as staff unsealed the plastic ballot boxes and began to tally votes in chalk on the blackboard. At a fishing dock in Maputo, 26-year-old fisherman Musa Usufo says he does not support any party because nothing ever changes. He says it won't make any difference who wins as a young person.
I would like to see the country with more job opportunities. As we know, there are lack of opportunities in this country. There is no employment for youth.
The favorite among 4 candidates vying to replace President Felipe Nyusi, who has served 2 terms, is 47-year-old Daniel Chapo, a lawyer viewed as a safe choice for business and a fresh face for the long-ruling party. His biggest challenge is thought to be Venancio Mondlane, an independent candidate popular among the youth. Former rebel commander Osufo Momad represents the official opposition party, Renamo, which usually comes a distant second. Youth activist Edson Cortez says the election is a foregone conclusion because he says the National Election Commission is controlled by Frelimo.
Frelimo will win the election, not because the voters love Frelimo, believe in Frelimo, but because they control the CNE and STI and the constitutional card.
The polls closed at 6 p.m. after a peaceful day of voting. The European Union and local civil society group May Integridade stated that they had not observed any major issues, but analysts think disputes could emerge in the coming days. Any contested outcome could trigger protests similar to those which broke out after Frelimo swept last year's municipal elections and which were forcefully suppressed. Philip Alexiou, VOA News.
For the latest on the Mozambique election, let's go to Maputo, where VOA's Nairobi Bureau Chief Mariama Diallo is standing by. Mariama, what's the latest on the vote counting?
Well, I got to tell you, Esther, thanks for having me once again. The vote counting was intense. I'm watching some of those images, and I was right there at one of them. I spent about 3.5 to 4 hours at a school, one of the secondary schools where I was at in the morning during voting. But yes, I'm saying it was intense for me, certainly, when I was in one of the rooms. At some point, they take all the ballot boxes, they count them, and there were about 275 in that particular ballot box. So then they close it, they seal it, and then they reopen it. Then they start reading, doing the tallies. And once they did all the tallies, one by one, think about it, it's 275 just in one room. And then they call them one by one, and they do all the tallies and then they come up with a number for each of them for the 4 candidates, at least for the presidential. Once they did the total of that, there was, it came up to 276. So basically, there was one vote that was not there. And I got to tell you, they had to start all over again. They had all the piles from Chapo to Venancio to Simango and Osufo Mamad, and they had to redo all of them one by one and, counting them all over again. And I ended up getting home very late and filing, but I talked to some other international observers who told me they were there until 1:30 or 2 o'clock in certain cases.
Now, Mariam, I'm going to ask you a double question here, so we're going to try to make it concise. What are you hearing from the opposition candidate so far? And again, what kind of challenges await whichever party wins this election?
Well, I think, for example, Simango voted at one polling station, and I remember after he finished voting, he complained. His complaints were that not enough of his people were accredited to actually observe the rest of the electoral process, meaning, counting votes. I think Venancio, who voted at a different station, also had some other complaints, maybe similar to that. But he also had another complaint talking about his parliamentary kind of coalition and where they stood in their numbers. That got switched at some point. And I think the National Electoral Commission actually did give some reasons why that was done. To move up to the next question about, what awaits the next leader of this country, I think just twofold. You talk about, the economy. Some of them talk about jobs. Some of them talk about education, infrastructure improvement. But on the other side, I think the biggest one that is very important is what's happening in the Cabo Delgado area, which is the oil and gas-rich area, which is very connected to the economy. Because if companies can invest in there, if companies can make money, basically the government won't be able, the country can't make money. So in that case, you can't create jobs, you can't improve the economy. So that's why I think one of the key priorities for at least Chapo, he talked about that if he won, he would make sure that area is secure.
Mariama, thank you so much for your reporting. VOA's Nairobi Bureau Chief Mariama Diallo live for us from Maputo, Mozambique. The Congress of South African Trade Unions is protesting this week over high unemployment and the high cost of living. Tuso Kumalo reports from Johannesburg.
Thousands of workers affiliated to South Africa's largest trade union, the Congress of South African Trade Unions, protested across the country, demanding that the government urgently address loss of jobs, high unemployment and growing poverty. Unemployment has risen to over 30%, while poverty has seen over 16 million people relying on social grants.
Basically, this economy has ground to a halt. It's stagnated since COVID. This economy has not even grown. And, we are even forecasting growth of less than 1% for this year. This is not good. Austerity measures, and now they're talking about cutting the basic education budget. It will affect our quality of education and affect our future, basically. And so we can't have that happen.
The workers also want the government to stop austerity measures that have seen budget cuts on social spending, including in the education sector.
The department want to cut the teachers starting from 2025 upwards. So we are worried that some of us might lose their jobs. And we need increase as promised. Like every year we get increase, but we didn't get anything.
The workers, we saw that they are less paid, their retrenchments, the living wage doesn't complement the livelihood that we are living. That's why you are here.
Reduction of high interest rates, prevention of crime and corruption, and an end to privatization of state-owned enterprises are also in the long list of the workers' demands. Tuso Kumalo for VOA News, Johannesburg.
25 million Sudanese are on the brink of famine due to the lack of food and the failure of aid to reach the needy people in displacement and refugee camps. The situation caused by the war is getting worse. For our reporter in Port Sudan, VOA's Paul Ndiho narrates this report.
The ongoing war in Sudan has resulted in severe humanitarian crisis. pushing approximately 25 million Sudanese to the brink of famine. Many are struggling to access food and aid, especially in displacement and refugee camps like Andre Camp for Sudanese refugees in Chad. The intensified fighting in Darfur and Western Sudan has exacerbated the situation, leaving people like Rakia, a refugee facing hunger and instability.
My name is Rukia Adam Haroon. I came from the Abkar district in Ganina City. My husband and all my brothers were killed, so I took my orphaned children and left the city. Now I live in Adre camp in eastern Chad. We are suffering from hunger. This morning I woke up at dawn and went to the window to get the daily flour ration, but they didn't give me anything.
According to the Integrated Food Security Phase classification, about 25.6 million Sudanese people are experiencing high levels of acute hunger, with half of the war-affected population struggling to feed themselves and their families. Approximately 755,000 people are already facing famine. The crisis has been worsened by the lack of aid from organizations, with relief trucks being detained and aid passage hindered.
I was in Ganina and my husband was killed. I was able to save the money to leave Ganina for the camp. I came here without having anything. The ration of flour and grains they gave us does not cover our needs, so I go out every day to look for work, and even job opportunities have decreased significantly in the past period due to the large number of refugees. We can no longer provide a living for the children, and we are suffering a lot these days.
However, there is potential for positive change. For our reporter in Port Sudan, I'm Paul Ndiho, VOA News.
The Sudan war is spreading to key food production areas in the southeastern parts of the country, creating a hunger crisis in several states. For more on the situation, I'm joined live via Skype from Nairobi, Kenya by Melaku Yirga, Masiko Regional Director for East and Southern Africa, who spent weeks in Sudan to assess the needs of civilians. Mr. Yirga, tell us what areas are being hit hardest by hunger and what is your organization doing to help?
Thank you, Esther, for having me today. The Darfur states in Western Sudan and areas such as Khartoum, North and Southern Kordofan are the hardest hit by conflict-induced hunger. As we have heard earlier, over 755,000 people are facing catastrophic hunger, majority of whom are women and children. To respond to the second part of your question, our activities are tailored to the context and potential that we see. Working with our partners, we support affected people through multi-purpose cash, nutrition supplies, emergency wash service, and other humanitarian assistance in some of the hard-to-reach areas. However, in areas like Gadarif, Kassala, River Nile and Kordofan states, our activities focus on building resilience capacities of communities and systems through enabling access to agricultural inputs like seeds, irrigation facilities, and access to finance to support agricultural production and productivity at the moment.
What was your assessment on children's needs in some of the states where you visited?
So this is human-induced crisis largely. Sudan right now is among the top 4 countries with the highest prevalence of global acute malnutrition, affecting over 13.6% of the population. The hunger and the malnutrition caused by conflict are not only immediate threats, but have also long-lasting impacts, leaving children with irreversible developmental damage. Once the gum rate, for instance, exceeds 10%, it is considered as serious public health issue requiring immediate intervention as well.
Mr. Yirga, what should Masiko and other aid organizations that are already working inside Sudan do to prevent further starvation and help Sudanese civilians that are going through this crisis?
So the need is enormous. The current appeal is met only by half. So I believe that we humanitarian organizations need to scale up our efforts, including multi-purpose cash assistance to some of the hard-to-reach areas that are suffering the worst from this crisis. As I mentioned earlier, we also need to work with communities and local market actors in places with high potential to increase agricultural production and productivity, including linkage to markets as well. I have seen in my week in Sudan, I have seen two sides of the story. While we know the catastrophic impact of the conflict, including the number of people affected earlier, there are also windows of opportunities to do something different and promote local production and productivity. So I feel that we can do on both sides of the spectrum right now.
Mr. Melaku, thank you very much for being in Sudan and giving us up-to-date situation on what's happening there and what you can do to help those people. Melaku Yerga is the Mercy Corps Regional Director for East and Southern Africa.
Thank you again.
Hurricane Milton left behind widespread destruction and it barreled across Florida Wednesday as a dangerous Category 3 storm. The second time in 2 weeks the southeastern state was hit by a powerful hurricane. VOA's Richard Green has the latest.
Milton made landfall Wednesday night along Florida's west coast near the city of Sarasota, carrying maximum sustained winds of 205 kilometers an hour. The winds ripped the fabric that covers the roof of Tropicana Stadium, the home of Major League Baseball's Tampa Bay Rays franchise. The hurricane's strong winds and heavy rains triggered high levels of water that flowed from the Gulf Coast into low-lying areas of the cities of Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota, and Fort Myers. Milton also spawned at least 24 tornadoes that crisscrossed the state well before the hurricane made landfall. Authorities say several people were killed by the tornadoes, including one that struck an upscale community near the city of Fort Pierce. More than 100 homes were destroyed, including that of Fort Myers resident Connor Farron.
And then like this, all this happened like instantaneously. Like these windows blew out. I was about probably right here when it happened. My cat over there on the desk. I grabbed the 2 dogs and like run under my bed. But that was it. Probably 1 minute total. Probably less.
Authorities say at least 2 million residents were left without electricity. The National Hurricane Center downgraded Milton to a Category 1 storm early Thursday morning as it made its way across central Florida. Forecasters warned of devastating rains and damaging winds throughout the day before the storm exits into the Atlantic Ocean. Richard Green, VOA News.
Let us know what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, America's voting landscape is changing and mail-in voting is on the rise. We'll be right back.
1 in 10 eligible voters in the United States are immigrants who are naturalized citizens. Among them is an estimated over 2.4 million foreign-born Africans who are now U.S. citizens, according to the Pew Research Center. On this week's Our Voices, we'll explore how African immigrants will be a key voting bloc in the upcoming presidential election and how women of color are mobilizing to ensure voting rights, especially for citizens of African descent. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
In other news, Amnesty International says 3 sub-Saharan African countries are considering ending the death penalty. Amnesty says there hasn't been an execution in Zimbabwe, Gambia, Kenya in over a decade, and all 3 nations have commuted multiple death sentences during that time. 24 countries across sub-Saharan Africa have abolished the death penalty for all crimes, according to Amnesty International. Amy Pope, Director General of the UN International Organization for Migration, is calling for safe migration to and from the Gulf countries as the dangerous Eastern Horn of Africa route claims more lives. The so-called Eastern route runs from the Horn of Africa to Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf by way of Ethiopia, Djibouti, Somalia, and Yemen. Migrant workers, mainly from Ethiopia, but also from other East African countries, travel over the route in search of jobs and economic opportunities. America's voting landscape is shifting. While many still cast ballots at local polls, mail-in voting is rising. Once limited to military personnel and citizens confined to their home, it's now the primary method in several U.S. states. This trend is sparking debate. Supporters cite convenience and increased turnout. Critics voice security concerns. However, studies consistently show mail-in voter fraud is extremely rare. We get more in this Voice of America report.
Traditionally, Americans have shown up in person at neighborhood polling places to cast their votes in elections. But many states now allow mail-in ballots, also called absentee voting, which allow voters to receive and return their ballot by mail or take it to a convenient and secure drop-off site. In the United States, many states send every registered voter a ballot, either by request or automatically, in the mail for elections. Voters are encouraged to return the ballot by mail or deposit it at a designated drop-off point. 8 states, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Nevada, Oregon, Utah, Vermont, and Washington, plus the District of Columbia, allow all elections to be conducted primarily by mail, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures. Provisions, however, are made for people who might need to vote in person. Other states have a mix of what elections and jurisdictions can take advantage of mail-in voting. Every state has mail-in voting regulations and deadlines. Deployed members of the military and the sick have long taken advantage of the option through absentee voting. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many states turned to mail-in voting to avoid crowds at polling places. In recent years, mail-in voting has become a contentious issue, with some politicians saying the option has the potential for fraud and tilts the vote in favor of a particular political party. Numerous investigations have revealed that those beliefs are unfounded.
Women in Africa are striving to make a positive impact in their countries. Today, we take you to Freetown, Sierra Leone, where lawyer Willietta Hughes is passionately advocating for the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women and children, in addition to promoting gender equality in the country. Willietta is also actively involved in dispute resolution, provides pro bono legal services to women and children, and hosts a popular radio segment to educate women and girls on their rights. Willietta, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you.
Right. What got you into this kind of advocacy, and why is it important to you?
The reason I became a lawyer was because I wanted to be of help, to really provide help and assistance to those who are in need. I had also wanted to be a major part of decision-making and influencing policies that reflect the lives of the many people that are around us. And so this is why I decided to do humanitarian work and to become part of the space, just taking up the space.
Now, you have provided pro bono services for women, meaning they don't have to pay to go to court, and you represent them and you take care of that. But tell us about perhaps a case that really stands out that you worked on, that you felt this was good, this has a good outcome, and it has an impact on the community.
Certainly. One of the issues we've been facing is the issue of child marriage. And so I had the opportunity to work on a case involving a child who was then sent into marriage, and that resulted into a whole lot of issues that eventually made her commit an offense. And so during the process of her committing an offense, she got sentenced to a sentence which was basically indefinite. And so this was a case that I was very passionate about because it involves changing or transforming the narrative of young girls that we have the right to be who we want to be and to decide on our marriages when we're old enough to do so.
Julieta, as I mentioned, you host a popular radio segment right there in Freetown to educate women and girls especially about their rights. What issues are most popular with the listeners? Do they call in? Is it live on air? How do you go about that?
So the program is actually live. However, we didn't have the opportunity to hear the voices of the people who were coming to tell us what they feel or how they relate to it. But what we did was to give the platform where we can reach to people in the interior, because the radio program is one that goes viral in our community. It's more listened to, and so we gave them the platform to talk about the rights, your freedom of expression. We spoke about the protection of the law, that the law should protect you, and that if you ever find yourself vulnerable, or you ever find yourself in a situation where you come in contact or in conflict with the law, you are guaranteed access to justice. You're also guaranteed a free trial that is impartial, and that you would be guaranteed a system that is free and fair. And this is just like a segment of the work that I've been involved with. Another very important aspect of the work that I've been involved with is engaging members of parliament in relation to the recently passed criminal procedure bill, wherein I was co-leading on the various acts, scrutinizing the act so that we ensure that the fundamental human rights are guaranteed, and not only are they guaranteed, but that the act also caters for the right to fair hearing, and that every side of the coin, whether you are on the prosecution side or you're on the defense side, you receive the protection the law should give you. So that was also a major part of the work that I've been involved with.
And very quickly, Julieta, how long does a case, take to determine in court?
So normally, I would say between 3 months to 6 months, but sometimes it lasts much longer, depending on the number of adjournments you get, depending on the complexity of the case, depending on the evidence that is being brought forward. So it sometimes takes a lot longer. I've been working on a case since 2023. I'm still on the case now, and it's taking much longer, but we do hope that, with time, we would get to a place where we would have very short and effective timing in relation to giving of judgment and the case management as a whole.
Julieta, thank you so much for your services to Sierra Leonean women and girls. Sierra Leonean lawyer Julieta Hughes speaking with us from Freetown, Sierra Leone. Thank you so much. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.